Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. Imagine an HOA announces to an entire neighborhood that your private road is now a public shortcut. When I complained, the president told me to be patient and that her lawyer was looking at it. Little did she know I was recording the call, and that was just the beginning. I want to preface this by saying I am not the kind of person who enjoys conflict. I spent most of my adult life trying to avoid it, but when someone decides to announce to an entire neighborhood that your private property is suddenly a public road without ever asking you, without ever knocking on your door, without even a phone call, you find out pretty quickly just how much patience you actually have. Let me give you some background before I get into the good stuff. About 8 years ago, I bought roughly 12 acres of land on the outskirts of a newer suburban area. The location was perfect because it sat right at the edge of all that development without actually being part of it. I had a custom home built far back from the main road, set into a wooded stretch of my land that gave me genuine privacy. No neighbors looking into my windows, no noise, no drama. Just trees, birds, and about a quarter mile of my own paved road that wound from the public street back to my house. That road was one of the more expensive parts of the whole project. I paid to have it properly graded and paved. It is single lane, well maintained, and at the entrance where it meets the public road, there are two small tasteful signs that say private drive. Nothing aggressive, nothing dramatic, just a simple, clear statement of what the road is. For years, people respected it. The occasional lost driver would pull in, realize their mistake, turn around, and leave. That was about as exciting as it got. The neighborhood that had grown up adjacent to my land was a different story. It was managed by one of those HOAs that takes itself very seriously. The board held monthly meetings that were apparently heated enough to generate gossip for weeks afterward. The president of the board was a woman who had, from what I gathered through casual conversations with people who lived there, turned the role into something resembling a full-time occupation. Residents talked about her the way people talk about a difficult boss. She was known for showing up unannounced to inspect properties, for drafting long newsletters about minor infractions, and for speaking in public meetings as though every decision she made carried the weight of actual legislation. I had very little interaction with any of this because I did not live in the neighborhood. I was just a landowner who happened to share a property boundary with it. The reason any of this became my problem was geography. The neighborhood had exactly one entrance and exit which connected to a fairly busy road. During rush hour, that intersection got ugly. There was a traffic light there that cycled slowly, and during the morning and evening commutes, the backup could stretch for quite a distance. It was the kind of daily frustration that builds over time and makes people look for alternatives. My private road happened to connect the main road to a smaller, quieter side road on the other side of my land. If someone drove down it and exited onto that side road, they could bypass the congested intersection entirely. It would shave a solid 10 minutes off the morning commute for anyone trying to get to the nearby school or onto the highway. I knew this because I used that route myself every single day. The difference was that the road was mine. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday afternoon in late spring. I was sitting on my back porch when I heard a car on the road. That was not unusual in itself. Delivery drivers occasionally missed the private drive signs. But this was a sedan I did not recognize, moving slowly like the driver was not sure they were in the right place. I did not think much of it. A few minutes later, it passed back the other way. The next morning, I was out early with my dog, who loved to lie on the warm asphalt near the house in the sun, when 3 cars went by within about 15 minutes. That got my attention. I brought the dog inside and stood at the edge of my property where I had a view of the road entrance. Over the next half hour, I counted 7 more vehicles, all unfamiliar, all clearly not delivery trucks or service vehicles. A minivan with a bumper sticker from the local soccer league, a pickup truck with a contractor logo, a hatchback with a bike rack, regular people going somewhere in a hurry during the morning rush. I was confused more than angry at that point. My first thought was that something had changed at the neighborhood entrance, maybe construction or an accident, and people were improvising. But there was nothing blocking that intersection. I checked. Whatever was sending people down my road was something else. By the 3rd morning, it had turned into what I can only describe as a convoy situation. I stood at the end of my road in my work clothes and watched a steady stream of vehicles treating my private land like a cut-through. The dog could not go outside at all. The noise and the exhaust and the general intrusion of strangers on what had been my quiet morning routine had shifted from confusing to genuinely upsetting. I decided to just ask someone what was going on. I waited near the entrance and flagged down a woman in a large SUV. She looked a little startled when I stepped toward her, and I kept my tone completely neutral. I told her this was a private driveway and asked if she was lost. She rolled her window down the rest of the way and said she was sorry, she had not realized. And then she said something that stopped me cold. She said the HOA had sent out a message telling residents that this road was now a community access route to help with the traffic situation. She offered to show me the message on her phone, and I said, "Yes, please." She held it up. It was an announcement from the HOA president sent to all residents of the neighborhood. The tone of it was cheerful and self-congratulatory, as though the board had just secured some kind of community victory. It announced the opening of what it called a new community access corridor, described the route, and even included a rough map with an arrow pointing directly at my road. It encouraged residents to take advantage of this new option during peak commute hours. It said nothing about who owned the road. It said nothing about any agreement with that owner. It presented my private property as though it were a public amenity the HOA had simply decided to make available. I thanked the woman, told her she was not in trouble but that she probably should not use this road until this got sorted out, and I went inside. I'm going to be honest. My first reaction was pure white-hot anger. I paced around my kitchen for about 10 minutes, but I have learned, usually the hard way, that acting while you are angry tends to make things worse. So I sat down, made some coffee, and started thinking clearly. The first thing I did was take a screenshot of the message on the woman's phone. I had photographed it when she held it up. Then I pulled up the HOA's contact information, which was publicly listed, and composed an email to every board member I could identify. I kept it professional and factual. I told them that I had become aware of their message to residents directing traffic onto my private road. I explained that the road was not a community access corridor of any kind. I attached a copy of my property deed and a survey map showing the exact boundaries of my land, including the road. I told them I needed them to send a correction to all residents within 24 hours and to confirm when that was done. The response I got back, signed by the board president herself, was not what I expected in its tone. I had half expected defensiveness or an apology. What I got instead was condescension. She thanked me for my message and said the board had received my claim, which was the word she used, as though I were making an allegation rather than stating a documented fact. She said the board was reviewing historical records and believed there may be a long-standing community access right connected to the road. She advised me not to obstruct the flow of traffic as this could result in community bylaw issues and said the matter was under review. She used legal-sounding phrases without any of the substance behind them. Words like prescriptive easement got tossed around. The message had the confident tone of someone who had spent 30 seconds on a search engine and decided that was enough to build a legal position on. I read the email twice. Then I printed it and put it in a folder. Over the following week, things got worse instead of better. No correction was sent. The traffic continued and then grew as more residents discovered the shortcut and started using it daily. Someone, and I never found out who, put up a handmade sign at the entrance to my road. It was cardboard with marker writing on it, taped to a wooden stake, pointing at my driveway with an arrow and the word shortcut on it. I removed it immediately, but by then the routine was established. People were using my road like it had always been there for them. The personal details are what really got under my skin. I found a fast food bag near the edge of my woods one morning, then some coffee cups, then a plastic water bottle, people rolling their windows down on their commute and just dropping trash onto the edge of my land without a second thought. The road that I had paid to build, that I maintained, that I had kept in good condition for 8 years, was being treated like a public thoroughfare by people who had no idea and frankly did not care whose property it was. I called my neighbor, the woman from the SUV, and asked her if she would be willing to forward me the original message she had received. She was friendly about it and said she thought what the HOA had done was pretty questionable and sent it right over. That gave me the original with the full sender information and timestamp intact. Then I started building a file. I ordered a good quality security camera and had it installed at the entrance to the road, angled to capture every vehicle that entered, time-stamped footage, saved to a cloud backup. I began a written log as well, noting dates and approximate traffic counts. I kept every piece of email correspondence organized. Then I did one more thing. I called the board president directly and I told her I was calling to follow up on my previous message and to inform her that I expected the retraction to be sent. She was dismissive. She said the board was still reviewing the matter and their lawyer was looking at it. She said she was confident the community had rights to the road and suggested I was making this more difficult than it needed to be. She told me to be patient. What she did not know was that I live in a state where you only need one party in a conversation to consent to it being recorded, and I had made sure I was that party before dialing her number. The whole call went into the folder. I took everything I had to a real estate attorney about 10 days after this started. I had a folder with the original HOA announcement, the correction the board president sent me, all subsequent emails, the recorded phone call, my property deed, my survey and plat map, and about a week and a half of time-stamped video logs and written records showing the volume of unauthorized traffic on my road. The attorney went through it methodically. He barely got through the first few documents before his expression shifted into something that was almost amused. He said my ownership of the road was not in question at all. There was no recorded easement of any kind connected to that road. No historical access agreement, no community covenant, nothing filed with the county that would give the neighborhood or the HOA any claim to it. What the board president had called a prescriptive easement simply did not exist. A prescriptive easement requires years of open, continuous, and uncontested use, and the road had always had private drive signs at its entrance. There was no ambiguity. He said that the HOA had not only been wrong, but had actively directed dozens of people to trespass on private property, and had done so in writing on their official communications with a map. He also pointed out something I had not fully considered. Because the HOA had specifically instructed residents to use the road, and because my road had not been built to public road standards since it was never intended to be one, the HOA had created a significant liability exposure for themselves. If anyone had been injured or caused an accident on that road during the period they were directing traffic onto it, the argument could be made that the HOA bore responsibility for putting people there. Their insurance carrier would not be happy to hear about any of this. He said we should send a cease and desist immediately and that we should make it count. The letter went out via certified mail to the HOA's registered address and also directly to the board president's home address. The attorney did not leave anything soft in it. It laid out clearly and formally that the HOA had facilitated mass trespassing on private property, citing the specific dates the announcement had gone out, the volume of traffic documented, and the recorded communications in which the board president had refused to issue a correction and claimed a legal right that did not exist. It demanded that the HOA produce, within 10 business days, a legally filed and county recorded easement document that would establish any right of access to the road. The letter made clear that if no such document could be produced, and the attorney and I both knew it could not because it did not exist, the HOA was required to immediately send a formal written retraction to every resident who had received the original announcement, and to provide proof to my attorney that this had been done. The letter also included a bill for the legal fees I had incurred up to that point and stated that the HOA was responsible for those costs given that their actions had created the situation requiring legal intervention. And then it got to the liability section, which I imagine was the part that truly got their attention. It stated plainly that by directing community residents to use a private road not designed or maintained to public road standards, the HOA had assumed responsibility for any accidents, property damage, or personal injuries that had occurred or might yet occur on that road during the period they were actively directing traffic onto it. It put them on notice that any future incidents would result in a claim against the HOA and its insurance carrier. My attorney told me to go home and wait. He expected to hear something within the week. He was right about the timeline, but I do not think either of us quite anticipated how fast things would move once that certified mail landed. From what I pieced together afterward through the neighbor in the SUV who had become a surprisingly useful source of information, the board president received the certified mail and initially reacted with the same dismissive confidence she had shown throughout. She apparently told at least one other board member that this was just posturing and that their lawyer had it handled. Except their lawyer had not actually been doing much of anything. The board president had mentioned a lawyer on the phone with me, but from what I understand, the board had done little more than have a brief and informal conversation with someone they knew who happened to have a law license. No formal engagement, no actual legal research, no real opinion had been rendered. When the certified mail arrived and they finally actually consulted with a real estate attorney in an urgent and panicked fashion, they got a very different conversation than the one they had been expecting. Their attorney apparently confirmed what mine had already told me. There was no easement. There was no historical claim. There was no prescriptive right. There was nothing. What they had done was announce to their entire community that a private road belonging to someone who was not a member of their HOA was open for use, and they had done it in writing with a map. And now they had a cease and desist demanding they produce documentation that did not exist, a bill for legal fees, and a liability notice sitting in front of them. The panic, as I understand it, was real. Within 4 days of the letter being delivered, my attorney received a call from the HOA's actual legal counsel, who was significantly more measured in tone than the board president had been on any of our communications. There was no bluster. There was no mention of historical plats or prescriptive easements. The attorney acknowledged on behalf of the HOA that there was no recorded easement and that their client had communicated inaccurate information to residents. He said the board would be sending a correction immediately and wanted to discuss the legal fees. The correction that went out to residents was everything I had asked for and then some. The board president's name was on it, but the tone was nothing like her earlier communications. It told residents to disregard all previous information about the road adjacent to the neighborhood. It stated clearly that the road was private property belonging to a landowner who had no obligation to the community and had granted no access rights of any kind. It told residents that anyone using the road was trespassing on private property and could face legal consequences. It apologized for the confusion their earlier message had caused. My attorney forwarded me a copy with a brief note that just said, as promised. The legal fees were paid within 30 days. I went to the next HOA meeting. I am not a member of the HOA and had no obligation to attend. But the meeting was held in a community space that was technically open to the public, and I wanted to see how it played out. I sat in the back and said nothing. The board president started the meeting trying to move briskly through the agenda as though nothing had happened. That lasted about 3 minutes before a resident cut her off and asked directly what had happened with the road situation and why the board had sent out information that turned out to be completely wrong. Then another resident asked about the legal fees and whether those were coming from the community fund. Then a third asked whether any residents had continued using the road after the correction and whether the community was now exposed to personal liability claims. The board president tried to manage it. She said the board had acted in good faith based on information they believed to be accurate. A man near the front said that was not a satisfying answer given that they had apparently not checked whether the information was accurate before sending it to the whole neighborhood. Someone else pointed out that the original message had been confident and celebratory in tone and had not mentioned any uncertainty at all. I did not say a word. I did not need to. The room was doing my work for me. The board president left that meeting with considerably less authority than she had walked in with. I learned later, again through my neighbor, that she stepped back from the board presidency within a few weeks, citing personal reasons. The community fund took a noticeable hit to cover the legal fees, which became known because someone asked for a line item breakdown at a subsequent meeting and the HOA was obligated to provide one. The specific amount became a recurring reference point whenever anyone wanted to illustrate a grievance about board decision-making. I used part of the money recovered from the legal fees to have a proper gate installed at the entrance to my road. It is a good one. Solid construction, automatic, opens with a code or a remote. There is a new sign beside it that a sign shop made for me, professional quality, that reads, "Private property, no trespassing," clearly and without any ambiguity. The gate went in on a Friday. That evening I sat out on my back porch with a drink and the dog stretched out at my feet, and the only sound was the wind in the trees and whatever was moving around in the woods at the edge of the property. No cars, no engines, no strangers cutting through my land on their way to wherever they needed to be. I thought about the whole episode for a while. The thing is, the board president and the HOA never actually had a plan that made any sense. They looked at a geography problem, saw a road that would solve it, and simply decided it was available to them without checking. When I pushed back, they leaned on legal language they did not understand, hoping that sounding confident would be enough to make me go away. They announced a shortcut without ever asking if it was theirs to offer. And when it finally caught up with them, they were not just wrong, they had put their entire community at legal and financial risk in the process. Staying calm was the whole thing. Not yelling at drivers, not putting up an aggressive sign, not calling the board president names or getting into a public argument. Just documenting everything, getting proper legal representation, and letting the paperwork do the talking. By the time the cease and desist landed, I had enough documentation to bury them 3 times over. They had nothing except an email chain that made them look worse with every message. They wanted a shortcut through my land. They ended up paying my lawyer, losing their president, and explaining to their neighbors why the community fund was lighter than it should have been. All because they assumed they could declare private property a public resource without asking the person who owned it. The gate is the best money I have spent on this property since building the road itself. Every time I drive through it, I feel genuinely good. They tried to turn my private road into a neighborhood highway. What they got instead was a gate, a bill, and a very public lesson about what a plat map actually says. The next one is a malicious compliance story. A little bit of background. Due to horrible teachers and my easily intimidated personality, I developed the fear of making mistakes since I was getting yelled at constantly for making some. Now my body tried to avoid school and the stress that comes with it by developing the habit of vomiting to prove my mother I was sick so I could stay home. Problem was, my body tries it a lot when I get stressed out. Now I can suppress that habit to a certain degree if I focus on my breathing and close my eyes. But sooner or later I have to leave the stress-causing situation or I vomit. Now, a little bit of German background since I don't know if this concept exists in other countries. We call it Zeitarbeit and Google translated it to temporarily employment. But long story short, it just means that you don't apply at the company you want to work for. You apply for the Zeitarbeit company, ZC, who then find jobs for you. You go to the ZC, give any important information they need to find you a job you don't totally hate, and if they find something, they call you and you have an interview with the new company you may work for. Then, if you agree to work there, you are a temporarily employee for 6 months. After the 6 months, they either let you go if the company believes it doesn't work out, or you get hired and now have a full job. In theory, that sounds awesome. In practicality, the companies spare money if they let go of the temporarily employee and circle to new ones, so your chance of staying is barely non-existing. Not to mention, in the 6 months, they don't need a reason to let you go, other than to say it doesn't work out. Now to the story. The first 2 jobs I got through ZC, I try hard to impress them, doing overtime, work more outside my job description, always being on time and never be sick. I ignored my mental problems and drowned them at home to endure everything. However, I wouldn't be here if I got hired. This story takes place in 2018, my 4th job, a factory where I have to pack and sort stuff. However, now I was far less enthusiastic, no overtime, keeping to my job description, but I still was always on time and stayed my 40 hours per week. However, the manager demanded overtime nearly daily. I wasn't going to do it, not for minimum wage, and she didn't like it, but I was doing my job, so I believe she kept me in for the full 6 months before they let me go. But then, I made an absolute fatal mistake by daring to get sick. I got a cyst very close to my private area, and I could barely walk, stand, or even sit. Laying was uncomfortable, but at least not painful. I went to the doctor, got antibiotics, and a doctor's note for 7 days. 5 for the antibiotics, and 2 to see if it helped enough. I called in my job to state I was sick for a week, but my manager demanded I gave it to her in person, or she would let me go then and there. Now I was annoyed, tired, and in pain that I have to go in, since I was just in my 2nd month working there, so I accepted, and my parents drove me in. I waddled like an X-legged penguin through the factory into her office. She didn't saw me walk since she was writing something. I put the doctor's notice on her desk, close to some other documents. She looked up at me and started talking. A lot. Now, you can imagine that condescending Karen tone in her voice. She started lecturing me how she dislikes I don't do overtime, and now that I'm lazy and went to the doctor to get a week of paid vacation, that I need to work on my working morale and that my chances of getting hired are very slim and I need to put in 110% if I want to have a chance. Now, my pain around my private area started worsening due to me standing, so I barely listened to her after that, but I noticed her voice got louder and louder and she, somehow, talked herself into rage, nearly yelling at this point. And I felt my stomach started turning. I started my strategies to keep my stomach calm since I knew it would be maybe a few minutes of her complaining before I can leave. I tried to cut in to explain that I need to go home to rest, but she had none of it and interrupt me, telling me how disrespectful it is to interrupt some. The irony, LL. Cue my malicious compliance. I stopped calming down my stomach and let it does what it want to do, and surprise, surprise, not even after a minute, everything comes out, hitting her desk and covers some of her documents, and half of my doctor's note. Her face was absolutely priceless, though I wished I could enjoyed it more next to my pain and new taste. After her initial shock and silence, she finally sent me home to rest. I still think about it till today. After the week, I came back rather healthy, and I got pulled into her office, where she and another boss/manager waited for me. After a few words back and forth, they asked me why I didn't even try turn around as I vomited, since I apparently damaged/destroyed some important documents. And even though I was not obligated to it, I explained the cyst I had, that I couldn't even walk, stand, or turn around without a lot of pain, let alone going to the next restroom or trash bin. And that I shouldn't even been there in the first place, since a doctor's note can be handed over after I came back. The other manager/boss looked super pissy at my manager. After more unimportant back and forth, I returned back to work. I still got let go after the 6th month, but I wasn't sorry about this job. I then decided to start focusing on my mental health and my addiction problem. For the last bit of fact, the manager was gone quickly after me and the factory was destroyed end of 2024. According to some of my old colleagues, they were constantly EF/hiring and more people were quitting on their own. The next one is an entitled people story. This has been one hell of a week, and it was only Monday. I'm getting knots just recounting the whole situation. I don't know if this belongs here, but it felt right. I, 2NB, worked at a very small grocer in a small community on an island of less than 3,000 as a cashier. It was your standard minimum wage cashier job, with more responsibilities bundled in because there was only 10 people working there. I wasn't particularly enthusiastic on account of the fluctuating schedule, the morning shifts, the weekly restocks, and dealing with the people of the community, who was usually old, slow, and annoying, all for a paycheck of less than a Nintendo Switch. But jobs here are non-existent, and I would take anything over waiting tables. But was starting to get the hang of everything. That was until yesterday. I got dropped off at work around 6:50 a.m. by my mom, and my boss came to the car and accused me by making passes at her husband on Saturday. He was busy helping to package the meats in the deli out back, in front of my mother. Now here's the thing. 1. I have not spoken to this man before or generally acknowledged his presence as I was going back and forth from the counter delivering stickers to put on the meat packaging. That machine is by my register. The only thing on my mind at that time was a growing mental breakdown and doing my job. 2. I am very autistic and I struggle to pick up on a lot of social quests. I'm also incredibly awkward, so I do not know how they would extrapolate that I was being flirty, especially to no stranger 3. I already have a girlfriend and I am not interested in men, especially married men from my community, who are older than my father no less. Both me and my mom were confused and shocked at this, and my mom backed me up on the previous points. But my boss wasn't particularly convinced and kept bringing up that I had to fire someone before because of this, and I'll give her one more chance. That she was constantly referring to an email she sent Saturday, telling me that the man was her husband. I simply replied thanking her for the clarification and thought nothing of it. So giant red flags, and I knew this was going to be a crap storm. Mom simply told me to let her know if crap got bad and that she'll tell me the details about the last incident later. So I headed in and this woman for the first hours of my shift kept pestering me about it, earshot of customers as I went about to do my daily task, saying things like, "Why did you reply to the email like that? Something is going on." Or, "You and your mom are lying about this and asking me about my age and telling me to stop pretending to not be interested in guys." She even said to not look at him, which is wild because that man would not stop staring at me that Thursday when I was trying to restock the bread shelf, and I tried not to acknowledge the weird guy because I was trying to do my job. Very petty, very unprofessional. She was acting extremely passive-aggressive and was staring at me. It was so ducking awkward and my anxious ass was shaking in my boots. I did not understand it. I was so uncomfortable. It's Monday and this idiot is trying to drag my name over insecurities. But because my mom was busy and home was like 40 miles away, I had to just tough it out until my shift ended. My mom texted me constantly to check up and make sure I was okay, as well as telling me that my dad said I had to resign. Once the shift ended and the financial woman came in, who I like and who is the boss's niece, pulled me aside and told me that she chastised her aunt for the unprofessionalism, as she say the email, and said that if I resigned, she understood completely as the past incident was a hot mess. I left, and on the ride, my mom told me that a few months prior, the incident was that her husband cheated on a previous employee and someone caught them cheating in the back by the deli. So not only was it insecurities, but also the fact she was willing to pull me under to protect an unfaithful creep. We discussed what to do, and I said I was going to resign because $230 a week was not enough to deal with this crap, especially since she showed her true colors and was petty. I pushed to the side, my mom got me a boba, and I sent an email today signing my resignation, in which I got two. A vague one around noon and one about 30 minutes ago, which looked long from my notifications bar, but I am not reading that now because I'm mentally too tired for this crap. The next one is an entitled parent's story. Her birthday just recently passed, and she's definitely hinting that she wants me to get her something. I sent her a text the morning of her birthday, and I figured I would give her a gift when I see her next, since we live close to each other. Instead of saying thank you, she sent me a picture of cards and cash that she got from some of her friends with no context. A few hours later, she texts me saying that she was hoping for a phone call from me so she can talk about her birthday, and she tells me a list of people who called. I was actually planning to call her when my kids got home from daycare and after dinner. So anyway, I call her and let her talk to the kids a bit, and then she asks if she can see the kids this weekend. I told her we already have plans, and she immediately says, "You knew it was my birthday." She usually makes plans and lets us know weeks in advance if she wants to do something for her birthday, but this year she didn't. So a couple days later, she sends me a text talking about her birthday again, and she sends another picture of more cash and cards. She also tells me that she's so proud of my brother for sending her chocolates and a gift card, which she called a small gift. Keep in mind, my brother is 40. It was such a weird choice of words. You're proud of your 40-year-old son for getting you a birthday gift? My brother sends her a gift every year. I feel like she was really trying to manipulate me here, like, oh, I'll be proud of you too if you get me something. I was really fed up after that text, so I tell her, we don't have a lot of money right now. I have 2 babies, they are 1 and 2, and another on the way. I'm 28 weeks, which is a high-risk pregnancy. You will get your gift when we see you. She then responds, I know that. I will help you with whatever you need. She honestly really can't help much because she works all the time, and not out of necessity. She really just loves money. The next text she sends is a completely different subject, so no more birthday bragging about all the gifts she got. I really don't feel like giving her a gift anymore because I don't like to be manipulated. I'm just going to give her back the cash she gave me for my birthday since our birthdays are about 2.5 weeks apart. This isn't even the worst she has manipulated me. When I was in college, I was broke and saving up for a spring break trip. So for her birthday, I mailed her a card, and I guess she didn't like that there was no money or gift card in it, so she sends me an angry text basically saying this gift isn't good enough, and my Christmas and birthday gifts next year will be greatly reduced. I just ended up mailing her a gift card she gave me for Christmas that I hadn't used yet, and of course she sends a text saying she's so grateful and happy. I understand gift-giving, receiving is her love language, and she does give good gifts, but I feel like this should be my dad's job to make her special day memorable. I don't know why she's depending on her friends and kids to make her birthday special. My paternal grandparents didn't celebrate holidays, so my dad doesn't really care too much about that kind of thing, but she can just communicate what she wants and he'll do it. No one else in our family is like this, just my mom. Anyway, thank you for watching.